Next, I'm going to show you again why it's so important to mess around with the resistance settings to get the look you want. I'm going to keep this field of grass and I'm going to add a new particle to the scene. I'm creating a new folder to put my sequences in to clean up my project panel. And I'm going to make my 200 by 200. I'll call this flower. Okay, and I'm going to move my anchor point to the bottom. And let's give a little life to this. So we could scale it up. I just created 2 duplicate keyframes at 100. And here I'm going to turn off the uniform scale. So now these are growing up. I'll ease these by clicking the word scale. I get both of them selected. They're eased. Okay, great. And now I can add a little life to it once it's there by using bend. I'll throw that on there. Now remember, top. I click my crosshairs. That's the top. Click my crosshairs. There's the bottom. So now I can add some swaying to this. So I'm going to click the amount, go forward a little bit, go in one direction, go forward a little bit, go in the opposite direction. You get the idea. Just going back and forth in different directions, randomly creating a breeze going through these flowers. And there's our animation, and if I drop down the preview quality, you'll see it faster, but like such. Nice little sway. Remember, you don't have to just have a still particle. You can apply effects. You can apply the basics of animation we already covered. Position, scale, rotation, transparency, overshoot. Sky's the limit. Anything can be a particle, and you just focus on the motion of the particle engine and then put in your custom particle. I'm going to throw my flower particle in here. I'm going to hide it. And I create my solid to put the particle system in. Layer new solid. I'll use Particle World because it's a 3D engine. If I want them to grow across the field, I could try this, or I could use fire and have them bloom up, but I'm going to mess around with this and see what it does, just to be experimental here. So I decrease the gravity, and I'm going to want a wider field of particles, like such. And I'm going to position this off the screen so that it's a little more haphazard looking. So you're going to see the particles will, let me drop down my resolution for the preview. The particles will go across that way. And again, I'm just experimenting. Alright, we're going to want a custom faded disc. And for the texture, we'll choose our flowers. And remember, you could always look at the layer number to make sure you've got the right one. And I'm going to have them be a consistent size because they're going to scale up anyway, and I don't want the flowers to shrink as they die. And I want the color of the actual flower, so I'm going to change both these colors to white so that they stay the same color over time. I can increase the velocity to have them spread out a little bit. See, they're rotating here. I don't want that. Let's try a different engine. This one's not working. So I'm just going to hit reset. And let's try this one. Texture faded disc again. Make them both white to keep the color of the flower. I've got to increase the life because I don't want them growing too often. That's better. That's more along the lines of what we want. So we had to increase the life. Let me turn off the grid because it's distracting me. We wanted a longer particle. We wanted less gravity, but spreading the particle system out through space. Like that. Good. We've got a composite because we don't need the light effect. Let's add a little volume shading to this, just for the fun of it. And there we have our flowers growing in across the field, swaying in the breeze. You can always increase the radius of the engine to have them more spread out if you want. See, like such. And I'm keeping the Z space down so they're not floating off of the ground. See, now they're still on the ground and they're a little less cluttered. That was just a call on my part. I didn't want too many of them clustered up like that. You could also go to extras and increase your random seed to get a little bit more variation in your flowers. I could also try having them grow a little bit. See, now I've got them at all different sizes, and that helps as well. So it's just playing around with your settings and thinking it through over space and time, what you want these particles to do, how you want them to behave. Remember, things like gravity, resistance, and how much Z depth there are will help sell your particle system a lot better. I'm going to clear out the scene, and I'm going to show you something very important. I'm going to create a new solid with my particles. I'm going to throw particle world on it. Okay, fine. I'm going to turn off the grid because it's in the way. Here we have it. There's our particles, okay? Now, in the slides, you're going to see an expression. So the last slide for particles has an updated expression. It's right here, okay? And I'm going to demonstrate what this will do. Watch what happens here. I'm going to animate my producer, okay? We'll go forward. I'm going to change where it's moving to. Like such. Oh, motion path. That's the one I want. Motion path right there. So that was under the grid. Look at this motion path. It's a straight line. There's no curves. Okay? That's really bad. That's garbage. I don't want that. I want curves, and I want more organic movement than that. Okay? So that was right there under motion path. I'm going to keep that on. I'm going to reset this. I'm going to turn off everything but the motion path. And I'm going to get rid of my keyframes. So there's my particle, okay? Now, I told you before, a null object is an invisible object that doesn't render, but you can use it in expressions and controlling things. And the null object is what we're going to use to get curved motion paths that just look more fluid than those harsh, sharp, ugly lines. I'm going to go layer new, null object. And I'm going to 3D enable it. So I had to go to my switches and modes. Here's my switches. Now the null is 3D enabled. And it's lined up right where the particle system is, okay? Because I didn't change the position of either of them. So I hit P for position so I can see my X, Y, and Z. And there's my producer, X, Y, and Z. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to Alt or Option click on the stopwatch, then pickwhip X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to paste this code in. I'm going to paste this in for X, but without the X there. So you're going to use this part right here. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to Alt or Option. I'm going to hold it down and click on the position. I'm going to paste in that expression and I'm going to click out of it. Okay. And right here where it says name of null, mine is null 1. And I changed that. Now that works. Always look at what your null is called because, like I said, I put it there for you for reference. Your null will be called something else. You just make sure that name is completely accurate with no extra spaces, follows it exactly, and you keep the quotes around it. So now I'm going to do this for Y. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, click there, paste in my expression, and click out of the expression. And I do the final thing for Z. I copy this part right here, hold down Alt or Option, click on that stopwatch, paste it in, change the name of the null. And then I click out of it. So there's my particle, there's my null. Now watch what's going to happen. I'm going to click the position stopwatch, move forward. And remember, if you hover over one of the gizmo arrows, you can constrict your motion to just one axis, X, Y, or Z. And now when I click on the path, you can see I actually have a path, and now I can adjust the Bezier curve handles. So I will get a smoother movement of my particles, like such. So that's sort of like a fairy dust type of animation we've got going on here. Let me go to my particle system. I'm going to show you another thing. I'm going to get rid of the velocity and the gravity and the extra. See what jet sideways looks like. Oh, we'll just try direction axes. Now I'm going to go to my particle. I'm going to make this a little easier for you to see. I'll use a faded sphere. Greatly increase the size. How long you want them to live is up to you, and I'll keep the color so you can see it changing over time. I'll just fill in that space a little bit. So what you're going to see here, this is sort of like one of them light draw on effects using particles. You just got to have them very tight, very close together. Just like that. Fiddle around with your different particles or use a custom one. And that's how you achieve it. You could always dial in the size, etc. But you don't want velocity. You want all those zeroed out so the particles stay close together. I mean, that's how you can get animated light trails. You can even throw a glow on it. And I'm going to hold down Alt or Option to go to 32 bits per channel. I put the glow on the null layer. Let me get rid of that by cutting it and then pasting it onto the particles. There we go. Now we're cooking. And then by adjusting the threshold, you can make it brighter or more dull. It's all up to you. And then you can also dial in your intensity. It's what you want as a designer. So that's an example of parenting the X, Y, and Z to a null using the expression I gave you in the slides, and then dialing in your look to get one of these light trail effects that are so popular. And remember, you could fix the size of the particle, use a custom particle. It doesn't matter. I'm just showing you these concepts so that you can learn them. If you don't want that clunky motion trail, that's the default for the particle system. Use the expression, and then you can get these curves that I've just shown you. And it's much easier to control as well. Plus, say you're doing something like a magic wand effect. You could parent the null to the motion of the wand, and then, you could have smoke or glows following around the wand. Possibilities are endless. I'm just showing you the concepts. You learn them, you practice them, and then you can apply them however you want in your own creative fashion. That's the way I teach. I teach you to be able to learn on your own. Now I'm going to experiment with something real fast. I'm going to click on my particle layer, and I'm going to turn back on my grid. There's the grid. And I'm going to go to my floor settings. And I'm going to change the floor action to ice. See what happens once the particles hit where your grid is? I'm getting a different effect now. It's treating that as ice, and they're sliding across them now. You could also do bounce and have them bounce off of it. That one's working a little less because of that. So let's try a new particle system to better demonstrate this, because this one's moving around. We'll get rid of my null, and I'm going to get rid of my glow just to speed up the workflow. And I'm going to reset my particles. There we go, there's particles. So I'm going to go back here, back to my physics. There's the floor. I'll move the floor up. Wait, let me just delete this whole thing, get rid of that, because it was still copying in the expression, and it's just faster for me to go here, physics, floor, to demonstrate this. So where the floor position is, you could have the interaction occur at any spot you want. I'm just going to do here so you can see it. And there's bounce. You can dial in the bounciness to however you want. Spread them out. So think about this. If you've got raindrops falling down, you could have them hit the imaginary ground and create little splashes. So that is, remember, the grid is going to be your floor. That's what bounce does. Ice, they slide across it like ice. Okay? This is used in a lot of superhero movies, like when Doctor Strange creates his portal, it spins around, and then the particles that hit the ground slide across like ice. Glue, they build up in a pile. This would be an example of salt or sand or snow falling and then accumulating over time. But you see, that's all based off of the life of the particle. So if I have the particle live longer, what you see there stays longer, plus you see the color change over time because of the life and death of it. Okay? It's all a juggling act. If I wanted this effect, I had to make the particle live longer so that it accumulates and lasts longer on the ground. Alright? Think about it step by step. That was just an easy fix because I needed more longevity to show the particles there with the glue. And with the ice, you see how they're scattering out further because of this. And now you get a more severe bounce because they're living longer. So it's going to change the behavior of your particles based upon how long they are. Just remember, like I said in the beginning, a particle is born. It comes on the screen, it does something, and then it dies. That's what a particle is. Then focus on the motion you're using with your physics engine. How do I want this to move while it's living and doing something? Then you worry about the look of the particle by doing a custom particle. Let's use the embers again for this. And I'll mask it. So now when I go to my particle, texture faded disk, choose my texture as there. Remember, it's got to be in the scene. And it's got to be a lot larger to see it. And there we have it. Same effect, just using a custom particle, and it'll still do the bounce or the ice or the glue, whatever you want, and that just brings it all in together. Focus on what you want to do, look at the motion, then change your particles to fit what you want them to look like after they're moving the way you want them to. I'm going to reset this, and I'm going to do one final thing. I'm going to do a star system. I'll call it the stars. And I'm going to duplicate it after I've got it looking the way I want, and I'm going to make a space gas in the scene. So, we've covered a lot of things with particles this week, and I just want you to remember, play around to get the look you want. I'm going to go to Extras, Effect Camera. If I want this shaped looking this way, see, the grid helps me know it's going towards the camera, so I'm going in the right direction with my rotation. Now I'm pressing my up and down arrow keys to get it to a perfect angle. Alright, so this is the direction I want the particles to be going. I got rid of the velocity. Let's get rid of the gravity, let's get rid of the extra. And let's really spread this out. And I'm going to hide the grid. Next, I'm going to have them live a very long time. And here's what's happening. I'm going to go back to... There's no floor action, good. I'm going to go back here to my particle. And I'm going to increase the size variation and the maximum opacity. Now remember, the default opacity map is always fade on, fade off. We don't want that for this. I want them constant. So I'm going to use the pen tool. There we go, I had to have my selection arrow loaded. So now I filled in, remember this would be fade on, and going the opposite direction would be fade off. Filling it in, it's not fading on or off. Okay, great. So if I want them to be born sooner, I could do move forward one frame, click on my hold particles, and then that. And they're still being born on a little too slow for me. So I'm going to just slide the whole layer down and then make it a little longer. So that's a bit better. So now that I've got these staying still, which I want, I could also go to my physics and adjust my resistance. See, now I'm getting a deeper star field. They're going further back in time. This is a good start. And how do I kick it up a notch? Custom color map. Now I've got 5 levels of color. So you could be using science and say, you know, near their birth, near their death, their whatever, or you could just go for a strictly aesthetic look. But now you see I've got a variety of color. Okay? That's half the battle right there. And you could choose your colors more wisely. You could even volume shade it. I'll try a screen. Or if I want, I could adjust the size so that they're closer or further from the camera and play around with my opacity. That's all up to you. That's the first step. I'm going to duplicate this. And let's see what happens if I throw a glow on this. The first one. That helps. I like what that's doing. And then I can adjust my threshold. See, now we've got something interesting happening. And remember, let's try the particle for that. Faded sphere might work better, in my opinion. And you could use whatever you want. You could put in any custom particle you like. I'm just showing you a couple steps here. So I'm happy with that. And I'm going to rename this stars. There we go. And this will be the space gas. new composition, gas 200 by 200, hit OK. Throw my cloud in it. I'm not going to animate this with an offset because there's really no breeze in outer space, and I'm just saving time because you've already seen me do that dozens of times. I drag the gas in, I hide it as a layer, then I go to my effects for the gas layer. I'll rename it. There we go. So, go to my particle, we want a texture faded disk. There's our texture, we're going to choose the gas. Crank that up. I'm going to use a composite because it's a gas. You can color it however you want. Let's just stick with this for the fun of it. Now, remember, we could volume shade it if we want. I like what the volume shade is doing, so I'm going to keep that on. Maximum opacity. Remember, if you have a large opacity, you'll get smoke, and then if you have a finer opacity, you can get gases and mist, things like that, fog. It's all up to you. It's how thick that opacity is. So I'm just going to crank up the birth size. And then my producer, let's try tightening that up a little bit so they're not so spread out. And then I'm just playing around with the X, Y, and Z of the radius to get the look that I want. There we go. I could then push a camera into this because there's Z space by going layer new camera. And remember, when you're working with the camera, I'll drop down my preview resolution. The less keyframes you use, the smoother your motion is going to be. And for this, I'm just going to do a simple zoom. Depth of field is on. There's my zoom. I go forward in time. And I'll ease those keyframes. And just to tie it all in the lab, I went over how to render, but I'll do it one more time. I'm going to just use Adobe Media Encoder for this. So I've got my timeline selected, I've got the right sequence that I want to render selected, and I'm going to go Composition, Add to Media Encoder, and then I wait for that to load up. The program opens, and then I have to wait for the sequence to load up here in the queue. Here it is. You're going to use H.264, the default right here, that plays on Mac and PC. You're going to keep it at high bitrate, and then here you click once to name it and put where you're going to save it. So I named it Space, hit save. I know where it's going, I know what it's going to be called. Then the last step, you just hit the green play arrow. And right here, you'll see an estimated time for how long it's going to take to render. Remember, the more complex your animation, the more render time you're going to have, but it's worth it because you could just walk away from your machine, grab a bite to eat, watch a TV show, just, check in on it from time to time to make sure your computer did not crash. And here I see I've got about maybe 2 minutes for this to render. Once you are done rendering, check your render afterwards by playing it back in a video player like QuickTime or whatever you've got, like Windows Media Player, and make sure it's good. And then when it's good, upload all your artwork, your project file, your render, put that in the Google Drive folder I made for you. So I've got full access to everything, but especially your render, because you're going to be graded on the render, okay? That's very important. All the files, just put them up in the Google Drive folder I made for you. Once your render is done, you can click here, hit delete or backspace to get rid of it. And then if you plan on doing more rendering, you could just minimize here or exit out if you're all done rendering for the day. And then make sure you preview your animations and have a great week.